Great. Hey, Ananda, do you want to share your screen or do you want me to? I do have it pulled up, so I'm happy to if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go for it.
Oh, I'm working on it. Here we go. All right. Hey, all right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks all for tuning into our pre-research advising. And today, Ananda and I will be talking about applying to PhD programs. So this is just sort of a high-level agenda. I'm going to talk about sort of what a PhD is like, just because I have just a tad bit more experience than Ananda, not much. And then she'll sort of go into more of how to do the application and how to make sure you get into your dream school. So Ananda, do you want to start with a quick intro?
Sure. So I'm a first-year PhD student at CU. So that means I started during the fall semester about 2 months ago. 2 months ago. Wow, time flies. Yeah. And my research interests are in natural language processing and in machine learning. So I am advised by Professors Katarina Khan and Martha Palmer. Yeah, and right now there's also like a sort of overlap with my research interests in just AI in education. So I'm also like working with the AI Institute that's been newly formed at CU.
Cool. And my name is Michael Hofer. This is my second year in the PhD program. My research interests are still kind of all over the place, but I've put this list together of cognitive science, human-centered computing, social systems, problem solving, and then I'm also sort of curious about NLP as well. My background is actually in industrial engineering, so I got my degree, my undergraduate and master's from Iowa State University, and then sort of went to go work in industry for a couple of years, and then yeah, decided that school was more fun, and am back here in the PhD program. And currently in the process of switching advisors too. But right now this semester working with Dr. Stephen Voida in the information science department. Okay, so I'm gonna just talk at a high level about reasons to do a PhD, and then Ananda and I can kind of share our own kind of personal reasons why we decided to do a PhD. So I guess I sort of want to, I don't know if these are myths, or I just want to sort of make this clear that generally, if you want to make a lot of money, if the goal is to make money, or if you're trying to become famous and the goal is to become famous, yeah, I would not recommend doing a PhD for either of these two things. You will probably be disappointed. I don't know if that is a common conception, but money and fame are you know, everybody here, I'm assuming, probably has computational skills and can program. And so after you get your master's or even your undergraduate, you know, you can go into industry and make more than a starting professor would make. So it's not necessarily something that that you do for the money. But there are many reasons to do a PhD. Okay, so this first one that I thought about is curiosity. So if you really want to be working and spending your time continuously learning, I think it's a lot easier to do that in a university setting. And having a PhD can open you up to a lot of jobs where really it's more intellectually demanding and you sort of can satisfy your curiosity. The second one, of somebody doing research, you have to enjoy doing research to do a PhD. That is really the bulk of the work. And if you don't enjoy research or don't want to do research in the future, I think it will be a big struggle to get through and do a PhD. And this third image that I put, at one of the orientations last fall, someone had a really nice quote that I liked, and it was something along the lines of, you know, everybody comes to grad school because to them, there's just something not quite right with the world, or there's something they want to figure out, or something they want to change, and they want to go make that happen. And this PhD is sort of that chance for them to go and do that. So maybe if there's a cause that you're really passionate about, you know, then the PhD is a good time to sort of really focus and dive into a topic that you truly care about and can work on. And then I put this, I realized I had like these three big graphics are not very nice. You know, everyone's hunched over, then there's a sad earth. And I also wanted to throw that there's just like great people in universities, and I think that there's a great like diversity of people, and I've met so far at CU. And I think that's another reason. It's just kind of being able to associate with people who are also very intellectually curious and sort of driven to, you know, make the world a better place, if you will, for lack of a better phrase. Yeah, so this is sort of like a high level overview, at least, of kind of I can put together different pieces of why to do a PhD. As far as me personally, the big thing was I went into industry and sort of looked at what life would be like there, and I didn't really see, you know, the salary is nice in industry, but I realized the quality of life is not necessarily correlated much with salary. And yeah, it was sort of a bit of a values mismatch between the sort of ever increasing, you know, chasing the stock price and trying to get the stock price as high as possible versus trying to make a big impact and sort of having that freedom to do research to make that impact. So that was ultimately what led me to apply to PhD programs, and very glad I made the decision to do so. Ananya, do you have thoughts you want to add on sort of what motivated you to come to a PhD?
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up very well, and I would say my reasons sort of were the same. I already graduated with a master's degree from UMass Amherst, and while I was there, I spent close to a year working on research projects with other grad students, and yeah, I just really enjoyed the process, especially in like a field like natural language processing, which is I think rapidly expanding, and there's like tons of unsolved problems that come out like every day. It just it was really exciting and inspiring to be able to run an experiment and discover something that nobody's discovered yet, and like share it with people. So yeah, I think I like the process of like collaboratively as a community, like discovering knowledge. And that was yeah, so I did, after graduation, go into industry for a year, because I think I still needed some time to, you know, make up my mind about whether or not I wanted to commit to like a 5-year journey. And yeah, I think so. I worked for a nonprofit. It was it's the educational testing service. We make the GRE and stuff, which I will be talking about later. Fun. But so yeah, I work for a nonprofit, but even there, I feel like a lot of the problems that you're asked to work on and like the projects that you get assigned are just like you have very little independence about what you can do. I think that sort of like segues very well into your next slide. Oh, I meant the one about the.
Oh, this one?
This one, yeah. So yeah, so I was like, you know, I want to spend a few more years just learning and sort of like exploring and getting to do research before I you know, tie myself down to a specific domain or a specific project at a company. So
yeah, that's a good point. I think that independence piece, I totally forgot about that, and that's critical. All right, I'm gonna hop back here real quick, and I guess, are there any questions? I'm not sure if we want to do questions as we go or questions at the end, but I think we can probably keep this informal. So if there's any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or shout them out.
Yeah, sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
So both of you mentioned you worked before going to grad school. So I was wondering, like after you leave college, what's the process like for getting rec letters?
Yeah.
we actually have like a section on rec letters later on. If you have the time to stay on, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right. Awesome.
Hi, I have a question. I see that both of you are master's students. So what percentage are having master's degree, and what percentage of students have come from undergrad?
I think it's a mix, and it also depends on the specific subdomain of computer
In
science.
NLP, you can tell me about
Sure knows.
Okay.
So it's kind
in
of like
NLP,
a 60-40 split. And so we have around 40% of our PhD applicants who have completed a master's and about 60% who come from undergrad. Does that give you an idea?
Right. Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Yeah, the general impression I have is that you don't really need a master's, but a master's might be a good way to trial out a PhD. It's sort of like a PhD light, if you will. You kind of get to the taste of all the different pieces of grad school and can decide if you want to spend 5 years doing it. All right. So real quick, I also want to go over kind of what is actually involved in a PhD. So many of you are master's students, and so you are getting an idea of what a graduate level course is like, and also maybe you're getting a taste of what research might be like. And that's really the two main components of a PhD. And they're always tied back to credits in some way, although the credits are not really commensurate with the amount of work that you put into it. So generally from what I found in at least the programs I applied to, it's generally about 60 credits for a PhD. And 30 of those are generally classes and 30 of those are research. And again, the credits does not mean much for research because you effectively start off your first few years of a PhD, you're taking probably 2 classes a semester, at least here at CU, that's kind of the norm, until you get your class requirements done. Then you sort of wean off into taking 1 class a semester and sort of ramp up your research. And yeah, and then the research can take, you know, anywhere from, like if you're really fast, maybe you can write a dissertation in 2 years. Generally people will take much longer, and it can take, you know, 4 to 6. I think 6 years is, I'm not sure what the statistics are for the CU, the CS program here at CU. But from what I recall from the recruitment, and maybe this is something Ratri can chime into as well, it's generally about your 5 to 6 year mark, I think is generally when they try to graduate most people.
The average has been 4.5 to 5 years.
Wow.
If you come with a master's degree, it's kind of sooner than that. But again, you know, it depends on the area of research, I guess. You know, people who are involved in systems tend to take longer than people who are involved in robotics research. It's a little different based on which area. I think PL systems, they do take a little longer. Again, the grad school gives 6 years. There are very far and few who actually do beyond 6. So yeah, the average has been 4.5 to 5.
Okay. I better speed things up myself then.
No, no pressure there.
Okay. Another thing I want to touch on is another component of the PhD is funding. And by the way, you'll see in this presentation, most of it's just like PhD comics and a couple Twitter posts, because I think this is probably the best way to communicate like what actually a PhD is like. So I'll let each person kind of read this comic on their own, but this sort of is a pretty fair representation of this weird limbo state between school and work. I think that's very accurate because at least in more of the STEM fields, when you're doing your PhD, you're paid to go to school, which is great because they pay for your tuition and they pay you a salary. And generally the salary is like probably enough to get by in most places. I think in this department, it's for CS students, it's relatively generous, and at least we can you know, pay the bills through that. But you do need to work as well. And so there's generally 3 options for funding. First one, which I'd say, well, actually, I don't know if it's the most common, but a lot of students will be a teaching assistant. And generally that's about 20 hours a week. And you're teaching recitation, grading papers, or grading homework assignments, grading projects, holding office hours with students, coursework planning, coming up with curriculum, that sort of thing. And then the rest of the time you'd be doing classes and research. The second option for funding is a research assistantship. And that's when you're the person you're working for, generally your advisor, sort of plays that almost like a research manager boss type role, where it's kind of this weird limbo state where you're still in school and you're taking classes, but you're also working for your advisor as a research assistant for them. And then the third option, which is the best option, is if you have a fellowship and then you have your own funding. And then depending on the advisor that you have, that could mean you have a lot of freedom on what you work on, and then you're sort of a little bit more your own boss. But something my master's advisor used to say is that, like, the key to really living a happy life as a PhD student is to be able to align each of the three sort of buckets of the PhD. So if you can align your funding with what you're working on, with your dissertation work, so you're getting paid to work on your dissertation work, if you can align those two, that's great. And then if you can also align your coursework with your dissertation work, then you sort of have all three of your categories of your PhD program are all moving towards your graduation and getting your dissertation done. So that's kind of something to consider as you're planning your PhD, is how am I going to align the time I'm spending on coursework, the time I'm spending getting paid, whether that's TA or RA or fellowship, and then the time I'm spending on research. And if you the more synergies and the more ways you can align that, I think the better. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add on that, Ananya?
Do we want to say anything about like sources of funding? Like projects that you work on are probably specifically, you know, in some cases tied to your advisors, like grants. Like, I don't know, do we want to discuss that in more detail?
I guess maybe if there are questions, we can come back to that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess the big thing to know is that, yeah, you have to work in grad school, but generally the work can be fun, and if you can align it with your dissertation, then it really doesn't feel all that much like work. Okay, so the research piece. So I wanted to share this comic because this idea of intellectual freedom and sort of working on what you want to work on, this comic sort of debunks that a little bit. So you see everybody is here in this before grad school where you want to research whatever you want. And then at some point you make a transition and you have an advisor and you research whatever your advisor wants, and then so on and so forth as you try to get tenure and, try to get funding. And then maybe when you're an emeritus professor, you can research whatever. But I wanted to share this just because I think it highlights the importance of, again, focusing on alignment. If you can align your interests with the professor that you choose to work with, that will make your life so much easier. So I think that's probably something Anya will get into later as we talk about like picking schools and professors you want to work with, but making sure that the work that you want to do is also the work your advisor wants to do. That makes it not a problem that you are going to research whatever your professor wants, because that is also what you want. So I think that's probably maybe like the most important piece of advice that I think I can share today, is trying to align research interests will just make everything so much smoother. Okay. So another part we want to talk about is what professors are looking for in the applications. And of course, as a PhD student, I was on Twitter this afternoon and this happened to pop up in my newsfeed. And so I had to share this here. Dr. Wells is in Northeastern University. She's a network scientist. And I thought she also has some good commentary on academia in general. But I thought she had a good answer. So things that they're looking for in letters of recommendation, which of course kind of reflect your application as a whole. Can you work independently on hard problems? What are you really excited about? What kind of support do you need to be successful? I don't understand that one as much. But I think a big thing is this: what are they really excited about? And is there a good research fit is sort of the general theme that I see professors really wanting to understand. And I think we'll get into this later when we talk about like customizing essays for different professors you want to work with, and doing legwork and reaching out to professors ahead of time and that sort of thing. So I think, again, it kind of goes back to that, having a good research fit with your professor. It's kind of strange because I think in undergrad, you generally apply to a school and, maybe your major is flexible and you care more about the location and the school. And then when you move into your PhD, it's really more focused on the advisors and the research fields that you want to work in, and then going to a department that has those people and that sort of like research capability to work on what you want to work on.
I have a question here.
Yeah.
Yeah. About the letter of recommendation, it's make any difference if that letters like was written by like adjunct professor or professor?
Oh, as in like a professor who doesn't have tenure?
Exactly, yeah. The professor that like work part-time in the university.
Yeah. Is this something you cover, Ananya, later on?
Not specifically, but I think, so when you say adjunct, I feel like typically adjunct professors might not be asked to do research, like their main responsibilities might be teaching. And
Exactly.
yeah, so if somebody is writing you a letter and they happen to be an adjunct professor, it's likely that they taught, that you were in a class that they taught. And I think in general, that counts less than a letter from a professor that supervised you on a research project. And Rajshri can like chip in as well.
Yeah, sure. And then is perfectly on the dot, actually. For LORs, for PhDs, definitely, highlighting the research experience has the biggest value. Again, anyone can submit the letter, but you want to see which holds more value or weightage, when the committee or the faculty is reviewing your application, right? And so somebody talking about a stellar research experience. I mean, not every student will have a publication when they apply, that's not even needed, but your research ethics or your contribution or how kind of, dedicated you are towards that research work, all those things will matter when faculties are looking. And so an adjunct who doesn't do research may or may not be able to kind of write more on that. But if there's a research faculty who doesn't teach, like, we have few who are research faculties and they do a lot of research work, but they don't teach, they may be a good option. They may not be bad in terms of, they may not be not in the tenure track at all, but those people's feedback might be valuable.
I do have a question still on that. And so for someone who doesn't have tons of experience doing research, but is willing to make up whatever is lacking, what's the path forward here? Is it like, okay, you got to go back to school? Like, what's the path forward?
Yeah, I think it's, oh, go ahead, Ananya, sorry.
I think it depends on like specific components of the application also. So if you're asking about like, what do you write in your statement of purpose or like your research statement, you can choose to highlight how your experiences like in industry, for instance, or even like your experiences working on class project sort of, would enrich your like the mindset that you bring to research as a PhD student.
Mm-hmm.
And with respect to letters, in that case, maybe again, if you've worked in industry for a few years and you have like supervisors or like managers who have worked with you for a long time and who can like attest to, to like qualities that the committee is looking for, that's a direction to proceed in.
Okay.
I think the only thing I would add to that is that I think if everyone here is a student at CU, I think a lot of professors love to get volunteers to help them with research, whether it's independent study credits or something like that. So you don't need to have research as a part of your formal curriculum to actually get that experience. Cold emailing professors, some may not be open to that, but I think many are and would appreciate sort of that free research labor. It can be sort of a good trade of getting that research experience, and then they can make more progress on their projects. So definitely encourage volunteering and reaching out to professors for that.
A quick follow-on question to that as well. If you are out of your undergrad but still have a decent connection with the university, would you recommend that you reach out to them anyway if you're interested in doing that kind of research? Or anything? Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard of too many cases like that, but I don't see any reason why you, I don't see any reason why you couldn't help out on a research project if you're not affiliated with the university. I don't know, Rashri, are there any rules against that? Do you see any reason why that couldn't work?
So there are not rules against it, there aren't, but I don't know how many faculties would be interested in going out of the student population to hire somebody who's not affiliated with CU. Like Spencer, of course, you know, you've been here, everybody knows you, you know, they know what you bring to the table. And so they might, you know, the PL group might actually reach out to you and say, hey, you know, these are your skills we already know. It's doable, right? It's just we don't know how many faculties would be open to doing it because they may or may not know these prospective students, so to call, right? So right now, you know, everybody knows we're having all these virtual sessions and we've posted the videos on our website. I highly encourage anyone who's interested in connecting with a group or faculty to watch those videos, because those are the people who are recruiting. It becomes really important to connect with people who are recruiting than just kind of emailing any faculty, right? So if you just email any faculty, there's less likelihood that you will hear back. But if you reach out to a person who's actually recruiting and is looking for PhD students, then there's more likelihood you'll get a response. So those are there to help all of you. So do take the advantage of those videos and the sessions that we've posted.
Thank you both.
And I do see one question in the chat from Michael about contacting advisors. I think we'll probably talk about that when we get to the application section. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's something else in the chat. I think we'll get into this too. Yeah, we'll get into the research statement.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. Should I go ahead?
Mm-hmm.
One thing, so when you say what professors look for, how much weightage of your research experience versus your GPA is given to your application, do you think? Is GPA an extremely important part of the application?
I would say for the PhD, not really, no. And Rajshri is shaking her head. So yeah, I would say your research experience and your research interests and the fit matters a lot more.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead with the next section where I actually describe what the application process is and how you would approach like each component of it. Hopefully that answers a lot of the questions you have as well. But feel free to like stop me with more questions. Okay. So I can control your screen. So do I just?
Sure. You should be able to click your arrow key, or I can move it for you as well.
Okay. Yeah. Or should I like share it from my screen?
Up to you.
Yeah. Let's do that. Can you stop your share?
Sure. Sure thing.
Okay. Okay. Oops. Okay. So can everyone see this okay? I hope so. Okay. So yeah, I saw that Michael had like a ton of like cool comics and graphics on his slides while I just had bullet points. So so I went and got some as well. So yeah, the first step before you start applying or like in the process is figuring out like which schools you want to target. So yeah, this comic here starts off with two students, you know, having like really high standards and, you know, just saying that, oh, a lot of schools are probably not good enough for me. And then they, as the application process goes, they drop their standards to, I'll probably just apply to wherever I get in. It's funny, but that's not exactly how you want to go about it. So the way that I specifically like narrowed down this process was, I mean, I knew that I wanted to work on like natural language processing. So that was the reason I was going into the PhD program in the first place. So yeah, for me, the most important thing was to find schools that had faculty doing research in fields that in the field that I was interested in. And so that's sort of how I started. There's like a lot of like factors that you need to keep in mind. you might, so you might be tempted in the beginning to just like apply to as many schools as possible, because obviously that's the best way to like maximize your chances of getting in. But yeah, it costs a lot of time and money in order to like apply. So that might like not be the best strategy unless you know you're doing this like only, yeah, you're like really committed and you're like going all in. So in terms of time, you need to like create, as part of the application process, you literally need to go on to the school's website, create an account, given like a ton of like bio data and other information. And if you're an international student, which I am, you need like you need to provide a ton of like information about like your visa status and stuff. um, so I would say even with like all the other components of the application in place, it takes at least like 3 to 4 hours to apply to one school. And money, like there's a cost to submitting the application fee that that varies from school to school. Typically I would say it's around $100, but it could vary anywhere from like 70 to like 150 ish. So yeah, so if you want to apply to 10 schools, that's on average like $1,000. And as like, you know, as a master's student, if you haven't like saved specifically for applying to grad school, I mean, that's like quite a significant amount of money. So yeah, so that's like your constraints, and like here your objective is sort of to get into like the best possible program that you will be happy in. And yeah, another thing you want to weigh in mind is also like your chance of getting in. This is strictly speaking like not as important, because a lot of people, especially I think women and underrepresented minorities, have like a tendency to like self-select them out of opportunities. Um, yeah, which is so like let's not do that. But also if you know, if you only pick like the top schools in your field and you only apply to the top 5 programs because you know you think those are the only places that best align with your interests, and yeah, then your ultimate like objective of like doing a PhD is sort of like in jeopardy, because that's when you have to sort of like balance your application with a mix of schools that are, you know, sort of like highly ranked and are hard to get into, but of course high quality programs, along with schools that you have like a better chance in, but again the program is still good and you have potential advisors that you can work with. So generally people call this like a mix of ambitious, moderate, and safety schools. And this might be a similar process that you followed while applying for undergrad or a master's program. So in terms of numbers, I think a good mix to have is to apply to about like 7 or 8 schools, with 1 or 2 of them being like your top, your dream programs, 3 or 4 of them being like more moderately ranked programs where you think you have a good chance of getting in, and 1 or 2 of them again should be fairly like safe. But also I think when it comes to like graduate admissions, like safe is not really a thing anymore, because there's just like a lot of external factors about a professor's funding and stuff, and it's not strictly like you as an applicant that that they're looking at. There's just like, yeah, so that's sort of how you'd like narrow down how many schools you want to apply to. So so once you've decided on like a good mix of where you want to apply to, you need to actually figure out which professors and which labs do high quality work in the area that you're interested in. So an excellent website for looking at this is Clcs Rankings. I mean, we're all computer science students, so this is broadly applicable, I think. I'm actually going to like click on this link and just show you how to use this website. Okay, so yeah, so it contains like a list of areas broadly classified into AI systems, theory, and interdisciplinary that typically at an American university, or actually this is worldwide, I think. So yeah, so typically the research areas that computer science professors tend to work on. And here is actually the, like according to them, the rankings, which is determined based on like number of publications and a few other factors. I'm not exactly sure what goes into it, but I've used it and I think it's fairly accurate. It's in fact much more like accurate in a sense for rankings than something like US News, which might yeah, just rank schools based on, I don't know, the amount of like grant money they bring in or something. I'm not even sure how those work. So CS rankings is just like a bit more systematic and trustable. And so if you want to specifically look for, let's say AI, you can like turn on and off the area that you're interested in. And then it'll basically like list all the schools that do research in that area. And then you can like expand and see which specific faculty actually work in that field. So here it lists like the names of individual professors, how many like publications they had in this time period over a decade. And if you click on these links, it contains a link to the professor's homepage. So that's what it takes you to. So what you can do here is, oops, I lost the Google Slides. Yeah, okay. So what you can do here is, oops. Sorry, was that a question? Cool, yeah. So once you've sort of like narrowed down what schools specifically work in the areas that you're interested in, it's a good idea to actually go to the individual faculty's homepages and look at specific problems that they work on. And maybe even like read some of their papers just to get a sense of how they think, you know, whether you find their work interesting. And another thing that you want to like sort of look into is you want to find schools that have multiple faculty working in the area that you're interested in. Like for instance, I'm interested in NLP, and at CU, I think there are like at least 4 to 5 professors who do research in like similar problems that I want to work on. And the reasons for this are many. Like first, it's sort of good, I think later in your, like over the course of your PhD, you probably will have collaborations with like other professors, and that's good. And you know, if you're going on to like an academic job and you need people to write you letters, like it's always good to have like interdisciplinary like collaborations and work, not just interdisciplinary, just any sort of collaborations and work. And also faculty, I feel these days tend to move around a lot. So hopefully it doesn't happen to you, but if you know, something happens and your advisor like moves to a different university or like leaves academia and moves to industry, then you sort of want to like know that you have somebody else who can take over and continue being your advisor. So yeah, it's always a good idea to sort of pick schools where you have like a broad number of potential advisors to pick from. Another thing that I looked at while I was applying was some sort of institutional support. Like some schools have centers for data science, and like, you know, centers for like language and speech processing and stuff. And the reason why this was important for me is that I know that the work that I'm interested in is sometimes like a little resource intensive in terms of, it's good, you might like need a lot of like GPUs to run experiments and stuff. And if you have like one solo faculty who works in your area, it might be like difficult for them to like provide you everything that you need to do well. And this sort of like institutional support is sometimes like nice to have. So lastly, rankings. So again, like I put this last because if you look at websites like US News, again, they don't really take into account differences in discipline, and it's going to be like very predictable. You know, you'd see like, you know, Stanford and CMU at the top, and then it's just, you can't really like trust it very much. So you need to take it with a grain of salt. That said, I think ranking does sort of correlate pretty well with like funding potentially available. So yeah, I think that's a good thing to keep in mind as well. You don't really want to yeah, yeah, so okay. So now the actual application has like multiple paths that have different like importance. I would say the most significant are the statement of purpose and the letters of recommendation. Probably the letters of recommendation are the most important component. The statement of purpose after that. So briefly, the GRE, it's just like a standardized test. In fact, this year, I think most universities are waiving it because of COVID. So yeah, I think at this point in the year, you should have probably like already taken the GRE and have like scores waiting to go. If you're here as a master's student and you just took the GRE like a couple of years ago, it's very likely that your scores are still valid, although you still have to pay ETS, my former employer, to send scores to schools. Go ahead, Rajshri.
No GRE is required.
Okay. Oh, ever at CU?
We're getting there.
Oh, cool.
we've started with that, and so we'll have a new announcement going forward, but we're having discussions on that. But fall 21, definitely not required.
Cool. Yeah, I endorse this direction. So the GPA, most schools will require you to like submit your transcript, and they can look at your GPA from that. So the CV, you've probably like written CVs. It contains like just a list of your education and all of your employment and experiences. The CV should also, I mean, broadly like include like publications, although of course you should talk about that in your statement of purpose in more detail. The CV should also include like any sorts of awards and honors that you've received over the course of your undergraduate or master's career. Even if it seems like small to you, like if you've got like a best TA award or something, please put it in there. Yeah, if you don't toot your own horn, nobody will. So questions on the chat? Okay. Yeah, I don't think you need to like convert your GPA. You just submit your undergraduate transcript. And most schools and professors are familiar with country-specific requirements, so they can figure it out. Okay, so specifically now, this statement of purpose, this is probably like a challenging part. So it's called a statement of purpose. It's sometimes also called a personal statement or a research statement. I would say like calling it a research statement is probably like the most accurate descriptor, because it should be like a technical document that talks about like your past research and sort of like ties that in with like your future research. Yeah, I don't want to like discourage any applicants. Like somebody just mentioned that what is your path if you haven't done any research in the past. So in that context, you can just like substitute like research for like project or like any sort of work that you've done. So these are broadly like the 4 main questions that you have to like answer in the statement of purpose. Why you're motivated to get a PhD, because it's like a big commitment. So you do need to express that you understand what goes into it and that you're prepared for it. You need to talk about like specific experiences. When I say experiences, again, I mean like your experience working on other like research projects, etc. How they've sort of like cultivated your interest towards like a particular topic. Then you sort of need to like make a statement of what your proposed research plans are, what you intend to work on during like the 5-year period of a PhD. And then you need to, of course, talk specifically about the school and like why you need to, like who you might work with, or like why you would like go to that particular school. And then it's always useful to have like a paragraph or 2 just about like your future plans of what you'll do with a PhD. Like, do you want to go into academia, become a professor? Do you want to like work in a national lab? Or so but I highly doubt that any professor is going to like hold you to plans that you propose in your statement. So even though I say, wait, what do I say? Yeah, even though I say what your interests are, you don't have to actually like worry that if you say, I'm interested in like machine translation, then that's the only thing the professor will want you to work on. It doesn't work that way. You still have time to figure things out and let your research interests evolve. So yeah.
I have a question here, if I could ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, could I just like make it broad, or just talk about specific deep problem in that in that field? Because I'm a little bit confused. I was talking that like last week with friends, and we didn't like reach for like a final agreement. What should we do? I mean, because they think like when you talk like this, I'm interested in like AI field, blah blah. That seems a bit broad and maybe not interesting for the professor. That's right. What should I do in that point?
I think that's sort of like I think you need to sort of like weave a delicate balance between the two. As in, if you're interested in like AI, you want to like keep it broad enough as to talk about like all the things that excite you about that particular field. Like, maybe you want to like build systems that can understand human language, or build systems that can like see the world the way we want to. But you also want to like indicate like a nuanced understanding of the actual problems in the field that you will work on. Because I mean, like professors, I think like they do a lot of reading, and like the best way to communicate with them is in like concrete, concise, technical language. So if you can like at least have a portion or 2, a paragraph or 2 about like specific problems and like talk about it, with a certain level of technical detail, I think that would be like best. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I was just typing something in the chat. There's one suggestion that I got from somebody, which was to sort of read a paper or 2 of a professor you want to work with, and then talk about one way you might extend that research in your statement of purpose. So this kind of shows the professor that you first of all know what they work on, and maybe shows them that you might have some idea about what you might want to do. And it just sort of shows that you're really like, that field a little bit more. So I think if you can somehow tailor and Nania's right, it is really a fine thread between like how broad and how specific you get. But I think if you can somehow tie it in with the professors you want to work with, so at least they would be interested, that'd probably be helpful.
And at times I have talked with a lot of prospective students, an exercise that they benefited from is kind of writing a research statement. It kind of makes them at least go through, if you're interested in Katharina Kahn, it'll make them go through her work or read about the work that she's done to make those connections, right? So a lot of times when I've given that exercise, they come back and say, wow, I hadn't even thought of it. Then now I started writing, I thought about so many different things, right? So it actually helped me do my statement of purpose, and of course, when you apply, and there will be supplemental questions asking potential advisor selection 1, 2, and 3. So you get 3 opportunities to list those. And again, those 3 will review your applications first, but then if they see a better match with some other faculty, they forward it to somebody else, their colleague, and say, hey, this is what I read. They had listed me, but I think there's more match with your work. And so the other faculties will then start looking at it. So there's a lot of faculty involvement in PhD application review.
Yep, totally. So I have here like a brief, sort of like template for what the statement of purpose, how the flow of it goes. So typically, I think some schools might have a word limit, but they expect to see a maximum of 1 to 1.5 pages of content. You start off with an introduction, and like Rajshri said, so hopefully the introduction should sort of like convey what your field is. So by the time somebody reads your introduction, like a systems professor reading it should be able to say, oh, this person wants to do natural language processing, and like pass it on to like the relevant professor who's actually going to read it. So the introduction, unlike I think an undergraduate like statement, it doesn't have to be very personal. I mean, you don't necessarily have to talk about like how passionate you are about computer science. I mean, they know you're passionate, which is why you're applying to do a PhD. So it's always like difficult, I think, to like write an introduction that is captivating, like not boring, but also provides a nice beginning to like the technical content that you're going to talk about later. I would say like a safe way to start an introduction is to sort of describe the field, or at least this is what I did. Feel free to disagree, Michael or Rajshri, is to like describe like the field, the state of the field that you're interested in, which in my case was like natural language processing, and to sort of broadly point out like the areas that are most open for like exploration, and sort of like weave that into like your work and like your future interests as well. I have a link later on to a statement of purpose that does that in a very beautiful way. So so after the introduction, you should spend like 2 or 3 paragraphs talking about like your past projects. So not just one project, hopefully a paragraph on each. So make sure to like address the motivation of the work that you did. So that would be like the research question, and typically that's what you do in a PhD as well. Like identify a research question and then like answer it. So if you can indicate like understanding of motivation behind a problem, and then how to address it, like I think that would be like really strong. So after like stating the motivation, you should also talk about your contribution. Like if you were mentored by like a PhD student or like a professor, and you did like something very specific to the project, make sure to like indicate what that specifically is. You can of course talk a little about like the findings. Was the project a success? Did your hypothesis, like, was it validated? Was it not? And don't worry about like negative results. It's perfectly fine to say, this is what we thought would happen, but that's not what happened. And here's what I learned after that. And then if you have like a significant outcome to the project, like if it led to a publication at a conference or a workshop, that's amazing, and please mention it. If it's somehow like, maybe if it was a class project and then the professor who taught the class let's say like offered you a research internship or a place in their lab, talk about that as well, like about, you know, the outcome of your work basically. And it's also a good idea to talk about just like lessons learned and, you know, what the effect of the project was on you. Like, did that project, you know, sort of make you realize that like data annotation is this huge open problem and we need to like work a lot more on it? Or did it make you realize that, you know, yeah, did it make you, you know, like realize you're really passionate about something else? That's also like worth talking about. So after that, you want to talk about like your proposal for what you're going to do and what you're interested in. So this could, like, I think, naturally flow from the past 2-3 paragraphs. I mean, you could say, I worked on this and here's what I want to work on next. Or like a better idea, like Rajshri and Michael said, is to tie this in with specific faculty or labs work at the university that you're applying to, and say, here's what I worked on, and here's how this might tie into this faculty's work if, you know, I extend it in this way. And yeah, I think that could be really convincing. So you should definitely have a section on why you're applying to this particular school. That could just be like a small paragraph, but it has to be there. And you need to like list specific faculty that you'd like to work with and which aspects of their work sort of like align with your work. And this is, so the last 2 points are typically the parts of the statement that you would tailor to every school that you apply to. And the others can be sort of like just broadly common, I would say. Yeah, of course, everyone has like their own way of writing it. So like, Michael, do you have anything more to add?
Oh, yeah, I did not really do a great job with my statement of purpose. Like, for example, the only 2 people that read it were my mom and my dad. So I think my recommendation is to like work with a professor that you worked with in the past and have them help craft this for you, because it is sort of difficult. So don't try to do it on your own. Don't do what I did.
Yeah, and you should also, I think, like give yourself enough time to write this. Like deadline, like application season is typically December 15th or so. Some schools are a week earlier. So I would say with everything else going on as a master's student, you probably want to start working on this in August and have like a few drafts ready for somebody to look at by October. And then, you know, like get it in good shape like a month before the deadline. Of course, it's easier said than done. I don't think I followed this timeline very well. But yeah, what Michael said was absolutely right. It definitely helps to have like a fellow researcher, even if it's just another PhD student, look over your work and sort of, yeah, look over like what you've written and give suggestions. That's super helpful. And of course, you can also like weave in a paragraph on what you want to do. I don't think that's on the slide. Okay, so yeah, so the Berkeley grad school has like a good document describing what a statement of purpose should contain. I sort of, you know, made the slide based on that, so it's probably going to be a little similar. This is by a professor at CMU called Jean Yang. She talks about like what was actually like in her statement. And then, so this is like a really good example to look at. This is another professor who broadly, you know, talks about like what not to do and what to do in a good statement of purpose. So another.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I just want to point out that we are at time, so I don't know if we want to try to wrap up the slides and then have some.
Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I tend to.
It's all good. All good.
Okay. Yeah.
Are you going to share the slides and the materials you are going through? Okay.
Sure. Rajshri?
But we'll be posting these slides on the website that I've actually just kind of shared on the chat, where I talk about Dan Larimore's presentation. So on the same site, we'll be uploading these slides and the video as well. So definitely, once Ananya and Michael share these slides with me, I'll post it there.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is the last slide, but it's also like the most important component of the application. You typically need 2 to 3 letters from people who advised your research to talk about, what sort of a researcher you are. And unfortunately or fortunately, the more higher ranked or the more famous and reputed they are, the better for you. So yeah, so that would mean like just within the first point, like senior or more well-known faculty, that their letters would have more weightage than more junior faculty, I think. And then there's industry research collaborators. This can like vary depending on where you worked at. Like if you worked at like Google Labs or something, the odds of you working with an established researcher are higher. But yeah, either way, industry like collaborators count as well. And then a little lower down is letters from professors whose class you were in, especially if they don't have much more to say than the student did well in my class. And I actually don't even know if the last one is done. Like, I don't know if people ask PhD students that they've worked with to give them letters. But if it was, I think it wouldn't be weighted very heavily.
How about postdoctoral researchers that you have worked with?
Yeah, I think that might not have as much weightage as a professor, but given that they already like have a PhD, I think that should count quite a bit. So that's about it. More questions?
And so along those lines, I don't know if it makes sense, but if, the postdocs or anyone that you're reaching out to have, collaborative publications or work with RCS faculty, then there is this, hey, I know this person kind of linkage that also adds some value just because they know who you have worked with. And so definitely it's gonna catch their attention. Okay, we are actually over the time, but we can still take a couple questions. If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to unmute yourselves or raise hands. We can use either of those to ask questions, but if you don't have questions, then yeah, of course, we'll share the slides, the video, and call it a day. Spencer, you had a question? Go ahead.
I do. So CU has been doing an excellent job having all of these online events that we can attend to learn more about the institution and talk with current students and faculty. And looking at other institutions, that doesn't seem to be typical. How do you advise we start discussions at institutions that like we've never attended, we don't have a connection there? Is there something better than sending a cold email to a professor trying to find one of their current students, particularly to those, the two of you presenting who did go through this process already? What was some of your experience with that?
Yeah, I would recommend contacting grad students of the professors you want to work with. You can find it on their website, and they generally have more time to talk. That was sort of, I met with one grad student who sort of gave me the overview of the field that I was going to apply into, and that was really helpful. So I think talking to grad students is your best bet, and they'll tell you if, they may tell you to, no, run away, don't work with this advisor, I want out, so I think the grad students can give you the true story there. But I wouldn't shy away from contacting professors unless on their website they explicitly say not to, because I think that's honestly a lot of the admissions just happens. Like professors say, hey, I want this student, I've been in contact with this student. That's something I failed to do with most of my applications. So yeah, do what I say, don't do as I do.
How important is the GRE score? Somebody asked in the chat. It is not important at all. Yeah.
This year, we're not even looking at it, so don't submit it.
There's a hand raise. Teach me.
Aditya, did you raise your hand? Feel free to ask.
Or anybody else. If there's any other. Oh, go ahead,
So
Aditya.
I put that question that I have a research experience with a corporate company here in India, and I wish to apply for CU bit initiative for the same one. Will that research weigh in? Because that's an exploratory research and not like a complete core research of the field.
So if you're talking about like the statement, then of course any work that you've done counts. If you're talking about a letter from your supervisor on this project, I would say that does count, but probably a little less than from like a professor who the committee might also, be familiar with.
Actually, like my supervisor is the principal lead scientist here in this company. Would that like getting a LOR from that person would value in my overall profile?
Sure. I mean, if that person has research experience, it's a leading scientist, why not, right? But again, LORs come after the research match. So make sure your research statement is strong enough to let our faculty know that you are the person they're looking for, so somehow they need to find that connection that, you're interested in their research, they are recruiting. So all those have to kind of come together. And then the next stage is LOR, right? And so if they have research in their bag, definitely that will have value. But again, as Ananya said, it'll have less value than a faculty, a teaching faculty or a research faculty who's got many publications. And faculty here are kind of like aware of their publication work. I think that really, really talks to them a lot.
Sure.
So I have a question. Like, let's say you entered the PhD program, and then after some time, you realize it's not for you. I had two questions. I was like, one, like, how common is that? And then two, like, what do people do then? Like, what happens then?
Can I take that? Okay. It's, I don't know if I can say how common it is or not. It depends on every individual situation. It depends on the job market. At times our students get recruited heavily because, CS is a very popular major. COVID happens, the job market is a slump. You never know. So I wouldn't say it happens very often, but there are students who feel this 5 years commitment is not for them, or the research area that they thought they were really passionate about is not speaking to them anymore. And it's okay. It's okay to go out in the job market, work for a couple of years, and then come back and figure out something else. Maybe something else will click, which is perfectly fine to do. A lot of students pick up a master's degree on their way out if they don't already have a master's degree in computer science. If you already have a master's in computer science, then students may not feel it as valuable because they already have a master's degree. Then, they just, a six-figure job is what they have received as an offer, and that's why they're leaving. So those are the reasons why students leave. So if you don't have a master's, they will pick up a master's on their way out, and there are ways to do that. There are two different options. So you could pick up either of those options. More than likely, if you're leaving the program, you will take the MS requirement option. But if you're not sure and you've done your area exam, after the area exam, you automatically get your master's degree. And so those are the ways. Do you want to add, Michael and Anya, anything?
You got it.
But
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So just one thing that I wanted to say, like about the choosing schools part was that, yeah, it's, you might want to like make sure to visit lab websites as well as like professors' individual websites, because sometimes, especially for like tenured professors, that's more up to date than their personal websites. And that also gives you a chance to find out, the recent publications and like current grad students. And typically it'll have like a note or two about whether or not they're recruiting. So
Yep.
you definitely want to like keep track of those.
That's a great point. They usually say, I'm looking for graduate students. And if you go to a junior faculty's website and check, it's highlighted and it's really big saying I'm recruiting. And more than likely, you'll have one of those videos posted as well, because almost everyone who's recruiting is doing these kind of recruitment sessions. So, you know, you can check that out as well. You know, it's going to help you understand them better.
I had a question regarding English proficiency requirement for international students. So, I mean, I'm a master's student and I will be finishing in spring 21, but I want to apply like right now for the next year. So, do I have to give TOEFL again?
No.
No.
So as far as I'm aware, if you have a master's degree from a school in America, then you don't have to like give any sort of proof of English proficiency. That counts as proof.
So if I can add, if your undergrad is from India, India is exempt from any language proficiency tests. So even when you got admitted to master's, you didn't have to submit that. And so you don't have to.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Was that CU specific, Rajshri? Because I don't
Yeah.
think most schools are like, okay.
It's CU specific.
Okay.
There are 15 countries that are exempt and India is one of them.
I
So.
see.
Okay, we're way beyond our time. I would really want to thank Michael and Ananya for taking this time out. I know both of you are really busy. We know you guys are TAs, you guys are PhD students, and all doing amazing work here. So I'm really appreciative of your time. And thank you everyone for joining the session. We hope it was helpful as you kind of navigate through application submission, and feel free to reach out to any one of us. Do we want to add our email addresses on the chat just in case they have questions? You can reach out to us if you have questions, and we'll be more than happy to help you out. By the way, we also have an application assistance program that we started as a fall 21, where our current students are volunteering to help applicants through the application process, you know, going through your SOPs. And there are a couple of faculties who've also signed up to help. And so we're trying to do a match. So feel free to fill that form out if you have a link. If you don't, maybe I should just provide it here. So you can fill out that. Give me just a second. I'm actually going to share that form with you all, so that you can fill out that form to get any kind of help you need in order to complete an application. GSA. Okay, I'll have to look at the email now because I don't have that link, it seems like. So what I can do is actually I can email all of you. I'll email you guys the link to that form, because right now I can't locate it, so I don't want to hold everyone. Feel free to fill that form, and we'll match you with a current student or a faculty to do that assistant helping you out through your application process. I hope that's going to help. Thank you again. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.